Order, please. The Subcommittee on Supply will come to order. It is now 7:35 p.m. The subcommittee is meeting to consider the estimates for the Department of Advanced Education, as outlined in Resolution E1. Resolved that a sum not exceeding $676,617,000 be granted to the Lieutenant Governor to defray expenses in respect of the Department of Advanced Education, pursuant to the estimate. I will now invite the Minister of Advanced Education to make opening comments of up to an hour, and if they wish, to introduce their staff to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kmaq, the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I am pleased to have the opportunity to present to you the first budget estimates for the newly created Department of Advanced Education. So it is my hope that as I walk you through our investments, programs, priorities, and plans for the 2022-23 year, you'll be inspired by the work, collaboration, innovation, and research underway to continue to support a strong, sustainable, and vibrant post-secondary system that meets the needs of our students and our labor market, both now and into the future. So before I continue, there are a few members of the team here with me today, and I'd like to introduce them now. So to my right is Nancy McClellan, who is the Deputy Minister for Advanced Education. To my left is Wanda Fletcher, who is the Executive Director of Finance Advisory Services with Finance and Treasury Board. Also with me today, sitting in my back to my left, is the rest of my support team. We have Cheryl Toe, Greg Els, Louise Van Wart, Ken Byron, and Tanya Lively. Several members of the Advanced Education Senior Leadership Team are also available to assist us, and I was just speaking to them in the back on my notes. So this is my first budget since becoming a minister. I'm looking forward to the experience and looking forward to sharing with you our path forward. Over the next half hour or so, I'll highlight the work underway to fulfill the goals of the department over the next year, with a focus on how we intend to achieve key government mandate priorities, specifically around enhancing healthcare training, improving governance to enhance the student experience, supporting inclusion, diversity, and accessibility across the system, and inspiring continued economic growth across Nova Scotia. Being an educator for almost 30 years before taking on this important role, I feel very fortunate to have the privilege to lead this department where education, training, and students are at the center of everything we do. Last year, the budget estimates for advanced education were a few paragraphs and a larger department's mandate. Thankfully, that has changed. Madam Chair, our domestic and international students and Nova Scotia's post-secondary institutions are a critical piece of the solution when it comes to meeting our vast and ambitious economic, population, and healthcare workforce goals. By creating a standalone Department of Advanced Education, my government sent a clear message that our work to foster a high-quality, inclusive, accountable, and collaborative post-secondary sector is a priority. It shows that this government understands that in order to reach our goals, we need our post-secondary system, our training and education arm, and our students, the future workforce, and the heartbeat of this province, at the center of our government's priorities and work. Advanced education deserves a dedicated team and a strong focus. I am excited to share the progress we've made on our mandate priorities and the historical work we've undertaken to support students and enhance the post-secondary sector. I will showcase our progress over the last several months and our future plans. Speaking of mandate and a vision forward, I'd like to share with you the vision, mission, and mandate of our new department. As a newly created department, it's important to have a defined focus for the students and the people we serve. All of our staff were invited to help us establish our vision and mission based on the priorities and mandate of our government. As a department, we envision a high-quality, collaborative, and inclusive post-secondary education system that is focused on helping all learners thrive. Our mission is to facilitate a proactive and inclusive post-secondary system through which people learn, grow, and thrive. We work in collaboration. My apologies. Our mandate is to facilitate a post-secondary education system where learners receive a high-quality education that meets their learning needs and allows them to thrive as members of vibrant communities and a successful province. We ensure that post-secondary education is accessible to all learners by removing barriers, including financial, by ensuring the system is equitable, diverse, inclusive, and by advancing the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's calls to actions for post-secondary education. We work in collaboration and partnership to support research and innovation and ensure our post-secondary education system proactively addresses the changing needs of the economy and contributes to social and economic growth. Madam Chair, we know we need students and the institutions who train them now more than ever if we are going to meet the unprecedented labor market.
Order. I would like to request that all members of the committee and presenters and the minister refer to me as mixed speaker. No worries. I recognize the Minister of Advanced Education.
Thank you, mixed speaker. I'll continue from that paragraph. So we know we need students and the institutions who train them now more than ever if we are going to meet the unprecedented labor market demand in healthcare professions and keep the commitment we made to all Nova Scotians to fix healthcare. In the last 6 months alone, since becoming minister, I've seen our post-secondary institutions heed the call and demonstrate flexibility and collaboration to create more seats, more innovative training options, and more partnerships to ensure we have a healthy workforce to meet the needs of our growing and aging population, both today and tomorrow. I will elaborate on the details of these investments and initiatives shortly. But I will say that having visited all of the universities, most of the NSCCs, to listen to the principals, the teachers, the professors, the students, there's a lot of work going on among them. And it's great to see our post-secondary system working together where students that have even graduated from universities are going to our NSCCs to get real life, real work experience and to be able to further their studies and to attain a career that wasn't even defined. And it works the other way, where we have students from NSCC that will go to the university setting to further their education to get the career that they want as well. So right now the post-secondary system is all hands on deck and working all together. Mixed Chair, I'm very proud of the partnerships we've created and the history we are making together to ensure our workforce, economy, and healthcare system is strong. I've seen our post-secondary students step up and pivot unimaginably during the pandemic to do what was needed to keep their training on track so they can enter our workforce and build their lives here in Nova Scotia, on time, with their degree or diploma in hand. Students have been through so much over these last 2 years, and I'm in awe. I'm in awe of the stories of strength, endurance, and passion that I've heard them tell me firsthand. As a matter of fact, as part of our student tours, we not only visited students in classrooms in person, we also had several online engagements with students, and that's in addition to the regular meetings that we would have with student leadership groups. So I've had the opportunity to hear a lot of these stories in many ways since becoming minister. My department does meet regularly with student groups. There's 2 government student roundtables, one for university students and the other for NSCC students, with representation from Students Nova Scotia, Canadian Federation of Students, and individual student union elected leaders from each campus. In fact, we just met with university students last week, where we, as always, gain valuable insight into the student experience. I'm very proud of the strong collaborative and trusted relationship we've already built with student groups across the province. I also recently began a student tour where I had the chance to meet with students from the universities and NSCC campuses that gave us insight into things that we didn't hear when we met with the student union groups. So with international students, we heard different things and new things. From domestic students, we heard new things. We asked questions about our student assistance program, which gave us different information. And we take all of the information and we do look into it for them. Some ask very specific questions. We take their information, we get back to them directly. But it's one of the most pleasant things that I do in this position is to really meet with students one-on-one. This tour was in addition to the regular university tour and NSCC tours that we do. And the feedback that we got from students and from faculty and from leadership is astounding. This is one of the advantages as a separate advanced education department can hyper-focus on what's most important, and that's our students. All this to say, Mixed Chair, I'm excited. In fact, we should all be excited about the many students who have told me they plan to stay in Nova Scotia after graduation and start their careers here. Maybe they'll start their families here. Maybe their children will go to school here. Maybe they'll all help us as our government achieve our goals of increasing the population. These students are our future doctors, nurses, CCAs, paramedics, skilled trades professionals, teachers, and early childhood educators, to name a few. These students are our province's future, and continued open dialogue with them is so important. I am absolutely committed to that. Mixed Chair, I promise I will get to the meat of our budget estimate soon. But I'd like to take a moment to share with you some of the details of the work I just mentioned and some key milestones of advanced education's broad and diverse mandate, as highlighted in my mandate letter. We are working to grow a progressive education model for continuing care assistance programs. Working with the Department of Seniors and Long-Term Care, the department has introduced a progressive education work and learn model that includes tuition support. The progressive education model allows CCAs to enter the workforce earlier than in a traditional CCA program. The aim is to increase the number of CCAs receiving training and working in the healthcare system. Work with the Department of Health and Wellness to assess the need for medical school residency seats. The department will work with the Department of Health and Wellness to better understand the need for medical residency seats that are targeted to areas of specialty and needs across the province. The department will continue to support the Provincial Sexual Violence Committee, which is a sexual violence prevention program on all post-secondary campuses. Its work is to prevent sexual violence on Nova Scotia university and college campuses through sharing expertise and resources. Advanced education will ensure that universities and the NSCC update their sexual violence policies every 3 years and will work with the private career colleges on the development and implementation of sexual violence policies. The department will continue to provide funding through the Sexual Violence Prevention Grant to support initiatives that endorse and advance the 10 recommendations outlined in the Changing the Culture of Acceptance 2017 report. We'll review education pathways at the NSCC for apprentice students. Working with the NSCC and the Nova Scotia Apprenticeship Agency, review the NSCC's prior learning program to identify gaps or areas of opportunities as it relates to students who are accredited apprentices, acquiring credits towards programs at NSCC. We'll review the Universities Act, governance models and structure. In 2022-23, the department will undertake a review of university legislation and bylaws focusing on governance, structure, accountability, and reporting, the University Board of Governor and Senate composition and powers. The review will be informed by a jurisdictional scan that looks at university governance and structure. Mixed Chair, we've made significant progress on every item listed in my mandate and even completed some priorities already. We are committed to the mandate work. We as a department and team are excited about the next chapter and our role in Nova Scotia's success. We will continue to work collaboratively to achieve the key deliverables outlined in my mandate letter and beyond to set our province on the path to further success and growth. Mixed Chair, without further ado, I would now like to turn my attention to the department's budget for 2022-23 and the priorities supported by those investments. Advanced Education's budget estimate for the upcoming 2022-23 fiscal year is $676,617,000. This total budget includes 76 full-time equivalent positions that support our critical work. 6 additional FTEs were transferred to the new department under this year's budget for roles that work to enhance inclusion and diversity in the post-secondary sector, and positions that will support the policy and planning division, who, at the moment, are a team of 2. The budget also includes $452,484,000 in funding to our post-secondary sector, including operating grants to the province's 10 universities. The operating grant increased by 1% this year, totaling $3.7 million, increased as prescribed in the Memorandum of Understanding the province has in place until 2024 with the universities. In this year's overall budget, Advanced Education received an $18.8 million increase, which includes $3.2 million for the expansion of nursing seats at Cape Breton University, Dalhousie, St. Francis Xavier, and Nova Scotia Community College. This is a year one investment to add an additional 200 nursing and practical nursing seats over 4 years. This is an exciting expansion for our future nursing workforce, and each nurse who graduates within the next 5 years will have a guaranteed job offer right here in Nova Scotia. $1.6 million for expansion of nursing seats at Cape Breton University and Dalhousie Yarmouth campus, including the diversity bonus. This investment supports a permanent increase of 62 entering year seats at CBU and 8 entering year seats at the Dalhousie Yarmouth campus. $3.7 million relates to the 1% increase in operating grants to universities I just referenced, as outlined in the current Memorandum of Understanding. $1.6 million for a student assistance increase provision for uncollectible accounts. $2 million for Nova Scotia Community College wage adjustments. $1.3 million to increased funding for the Nova Scotia University Student Bursary Program. Under this program, every Nova Scotia resident who attends a Nova Scotia university receives the Nova Scotia University Student Bursary of $1,283 annually based on full-time study. This is money that is taken directly off the student's tuition invoice and doesn't need to be repaid. $1.3 million for long-standing funding agreements with the Nova Scotia Community College and Nova Scotia Universities for disability service delivery, which are being renewed in 2022-23. A funding increase is required due to the increase in enrollment of post-secondary students with disabilities, which is a huge success. $1.2 million to support additional seats at the Dalhousie Medical School to help address the family physician shortage. This investment represents the 4th year of increased funding to the med school to cover the cost of adding 16 additional entering year seats in 2019-2020. Adding more seats helps us recruit and retain doctors and support more Mi'kmaq, Indigenous, African Nova Scotian, and rural students to become family physicians. 4 seats were added for the 2019-20 academic year, targeting students from rural Nova Scotia. 12 more seats were added for 2020-21 school year. And those seats are greatly needed in our province. $1.1 million in increased funding to support the Repayment Assistance Plan. The Repayment Assistance Plan is a debt management tool made available to borrowers who are having difficulty paying their student loan debt. This program makes it easier for student loan borrowers to manage their debt by paying back their student loan at a rate that they can reasonably afford based on their income and family size. This year alone, the program helped over 11,000 students. $1 million to support the new Nova Scotia Community Colleges residences to be built at the Pictou, Ivany, and Akerley campuses. I will speak more to this shortly. Mixed Chair, our budget highlights some of the many exciting things going on at advanced education, but by no means does it tell the whole story. I'd like now to take some time to share some details on our core programs and also highlight some significant investments made in the past 6 months since the department was created. Mixed Chair, for those of you who may not know, the Student Assistance Program provides needs-based financial assistance to eligible Nova Scotian residents who would be unable or unlikely to pursue post-secondary education otherwise due to insufficient resources. Proudly, Nova Scotia has one of the best student assistance programs in the country. Nova Scotia student assistance has been significantly improved in the last 10 years. $30 million for Nova Scotia students in need. But we know, especially during the pandemic, more is needed to be done. Along with the pandemic causing difficulties like isolation and mental health challenges, a move to online learning, the inability for students to gather and learn in the ways that they were used to, it created challenges for students to secure part-time or summer employment, making it almost impossible for many to make or save money for their education. We recognize students needed help, and about a month ago, my department made a $9.8 million investment in thousands of eligible Nova Scotia students in the greatest need, with the issuance of a one-time, non-repayable COVID grant. This grant put $875 in the pockets of almost 11,000 students to help them with the rising cost of living during the pandemic. These funds came to them at a critical time when they're nearing the end, when they're entering exams, and has taken a lot of stress off of so many students. Students had very easy access to this money, as if they were eligible for a Nova Scotia student loan, the money was deposited directly into their account. Students have been very supportive of this grant and have said that it has helped reduce their anxiety and worry about how they will pay their rent or cover the cost of food, and they've been more able to focus on their studies. As demonstrated by this grant, our key focus in student assistance has been reducing student debt loads and making it more attractive for students to stay in Nova Scotia after graduation. The Loan Forgiveness Program has been one of our biggest success stories under that effort. Under the Loan Forgiveness Program, eligible Nova Scotia students can have the entire portion of their provincial student loan wiped out upon graduation if they complete their program within 5 years. Since its inception, loan forgiveness has saved over 10,000 students close to $76 million in student debt. Loan forgiveness is just one example of how we are enhancing programs to help students. Another is the increases made to the maximum provincial weekly assistance, which went from $150 to $200 per week of study in 2018. Earlier, I talked about the enhancements we made under the repayment assistance plan, totaling $1.1 million. I also talked about the enhancements to the Nova Scotia University student bursary, totaling $1.3 million. With the supports I have mentioned, in total, Nova Scotia students can receive over $40,000 in non-repayable student assistance. Mixed Chair, improvements are made to our programs based on many factors, but one major consideration is the student's voice. I gave some examples earlier about how we hear from students. I'd like to share an example of how we are listening and acting. This past fall, the Premier met with a group of Dalhousie nursing students who told him that they were experiencing a unique funding gap in their student assistance eligibility that left them short enough funding to cover the entire duration of their program. My department was able to act quickly to respond to student concerns by closing that gap and helping almost 250 nursing students access the funds they needed to make their program more accessible and affordable. The average amount that students received under this enhancement was about $3,300. To meet unprecedented demand in our healthcare labor market, these nurses will also have a guaranteed job here in Nova Scotia upon graduation if they so choose, where they will have significant earning potential. Another group of students that we heard from was continuing care assistants in training. Just recently, the government invested $57 million in the continuing care sector. Part of that investment will cover tuition costs for more than 2,000 full or part-time CCA students under the Work and Learn program. We've already heard from some of the students who are benefiting from this investment, like Amy Lake, who said the program changed her life by giving her the opportunity to work in a supportive environment while she furthers her education without financial concern or stress for herself and her family. Mixed chair. As I mentioned earlier, and as you heard the finance minister say in yesterday's budget speech, we've partnered with CBU, St. FX, DAL, and NSCC to add an additional 200 nursing and practical nursing seats. These additional students will begin their studies as early as this September. And with guaranteed jobs and high earning potential, they can begin their nursing careers here in Nova Scotia in just a few short years. I'm very proud of our post-secondary institutions for working so collaboratively with us to make this training a reality on such short notice. We are very grateful for how much our domestic institutions have pivoted to respond. But Mixed Chair, in order to meet the unprecedented demand in our healthcare system, we need to explore all training options and solutions, including those with world-renowned providers outside Nova Scotia. Several weeks ago, Advanced Education and Health and Wellness, along with Nova Scotia Health, signed a memorandum of understanding with the Toronto-based Michener Institute of Education at University Health Network. The Michener Institute is a world-renowned training provider that has an impressive track record. They specialize in applied health sciences education and provide training opportunities for critical positions within the healthcare system. The MOU establishes a relationship with the Institute to explore innovative opportunities to increase training capacity for positions that are in demand in the Nova Scotia healthcare system. We are working through the details of the MOU right now, and I hope to have more information to share with you soon. All this is in addition to the domestic increase of medical lab technician training at NSCC, which I spoke about earlier. These are just some examples of how we are making multi-million-dollar investments in our students and post-secondary sector to ensure we have the healthcare workforce of today and tomorrow. It's a partnership and a strong example of collaboration. Mixed Chair, in the last 10 days, I've had the privilege to announce $130 million in research, innovation, and infrastructure investments for students, institutions, and Nova Scotians. Last week, we announced the addition of $25 million to the Research Opportunities Fund to invest in more research and innovation happening across Nova Scotia. The Research Opportunities Fund is managed by Research Nova Scotia. The additional funding will be used to support research opportunities in Nova Scotia linked to government priorities like economic growth, population growth, health innovation, and mental health. Mixed Chair, We know an investment in research is an investment in job creation, healthcare solutions, and business innovation, and puts Nova Scotia on the map as an ideas and solutions hub. This investment supports our researchers in creating new technologies, medicines, and strategies that will help solve Nova Scotia's biggest challenges. Mixed Chair, some examples of projects that have recently been supported by the Research Opportunities Fund include tracking COVID-19 in wastewater, an additional 20 projects that addressed vital COVID-19 questions, including personal protective equipment, supply chain, mental health, socioeconomic impacts, vaccine development, and treatments. Other projects included research for climate change, adaptation, and resilience, using, storing, and improving manufacturing for solar energy clean technology, and research for the sustainable bioeconomy, such as developing state-of-the-art advanced ceramics for healthcare, clean technology, and marine use. Mixed Chair, ensuring our post-secondary institutions remain competitive and have the space and infrastructure needed to welcome and train the future workforce is essential for our economic future. On Monday, I had the pleasure to travel to Cape Breton University, where I announced $105 million to enhance infrastructure research, innovation at the province's 4 rural universities. The $105 million investment represents one-time operating funding that includes 3 pieces: $65 million in deferred maintenance investments at St. Avex, Acadia University St. Anne, and Cape Breton University. $35 million to support the construction of a Center for Discovery and Innovation at Cape Breton University, and $5 million to execute planning for a strategic health initiative. The deferred maintenance investments will allow rural universities to address a significant backlog of infrastructure upgrades and improvements. Examples include electrical upgrades, roof replacements, accessibility, and mechanical upgrades. St. Francis Xavier University will receive $23.4 million. Acadia University will receive $22 million. Cape Breton University will receive $14 million, and University St. Anne will receive $5.6 million for deferred maintenance. The funding was allocated to each institution based on the university's share of the total operating funding provided to the 4 universities. The Center for Discovery and Innovation at CBU is a construction project that will house state-of-the-art research and instructional facilities. The center will feature the latest in green technology and digital infrastructure and will elevate Cape Breton Island as a national destination for research, innovation, health sciences, and a global destination for students. The planning for the Strategic Health Initiative will explore training and healthcare enhancement options to recruit and retain healthcare workers in areas of the province outside of the urban core. The planning work to be undertaken by CBU will address health education opportunities, health research, as well as the infrastructure needed for health education and training at CBU. These universities are the heart of our rural communities, and these investments will not only improve buildings, they will also create innovative spaces that will house some of the best research facilities and most talented people that will create the solutions needed to address our local and global challenges. These infrastructure announcements are in addition to the investment in the new NSCC Marconi campus, currently under construction on the Sydney waterfront. It is quite a spectacle to see. With its modern design, open spaces, and state-of-the-art technology, it will create a dynamic learning environment that will attract students from across the province and beyond. The new campus is being built in accordance with accessibility and environmental standards and includes a 150-seat lecture hall and 25 daycare spots. The build is on schedule and on budget. The 2022-23 budget allocation for Marconi is $45 million. In addition to all the other projects and investments I've mentioned, we are also focused on enhancing access to housing for post-secondary students. Students have told us that they need better access to safe, affordable, and accessible housing options. Mixed Chair, in response, we are constructing 3 new Nova Scotia Community College residences that include 350 new beds. These residences will be constructed at the Ivany, Akerley, and Pictou NSCC campuses. These residences represent an $89.9 million investment to provide more housing options to post-secondary students in various communities. The Pictou residence will open in September 2023, and the Ivany and Akerley residences will open in September 2024. Mixed Chair, these new residences will inform a larger, collaborative, province-wide long-term housing strategy. Part of that work includes a student housing element that aims to identify more solutions for student housing across Nova Scotia. Increasing student housing helps to alleviate the pressure on the overall market housing supply, as students who move onto campus will free up housing options in the surrounding community for others in need. This significant investment in housing stock shows our government's commitment to finding solutions to ensure all Nova Scotians have better access to housing options. Mixed Chair, inclusion, diversity, and accessibility are at the core of our work. Before I conclude, I'd like to elaborate on that. We must foster a post-secondary system that is safe, accessible, and represents the diversity of the province. I touched on this briefly earlier. I'm proud to say that all universities have standalone sexual violence prevention policies in place and must be updated every 3 years. In 2022-23, the department will work with universities and the NSCC to further the implementation of sexual violence policies, as well as work with the private career colleges on the development and implementation of sexual violence policies. The department will also implement new funding agreements to support students with disabilities at each publicly funded institution. Additionally, we will move forward with our strategic plan that supports the recruitment and retention of Mi'kmaq and Indigenous post-secondary students. This is important and exciting work that reflects our mandate to be culturally competent and have a post-secondary system and institutions where all students, regardless of race, ability, gender, age, or background, see themselves reflected in our policies. Mixed Chair, I know I've given you lots to digest. I hope these remarks reflect the extreme pride I have in the work of my team and the mandate of my department. I do indeed work with an incredible group of professionals. Our work is not only important, it is necessary. I am now happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Minister. Now it is practice that each caucus has up to an hour to ask questions of the minister. Only the minister may answer questions. And to begin, I will now recognize MLA Jessam from the official opposition.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. Welcome to Province House, tout le monde. It's good to see everybody back in here. Minister Wong, congratulations on the latest venture of your long career in supporting students and education. I know your heart is certainly in it, and I've appreciated your willingness to connect over the last 6 months as we adjust to our new roles. And to staff in the room and who I know are watching attentively at home, thank you for your time and effort getting the minister up to speed and serving Nova Scotians for the last number of years, certainly leading up to today. Budget's a difficult thing to prep for, I can expect. I only got one kick at the can as minister, but I was grateful for the support that I had at the Public Service Commission, and I know that there were staff that we deployed to serve your departments and to serve departments throughout the public service, and I know the hard work that goes on. So thank you very much. I had asked to get involved in this critic role because the student experience, the student leadership experience was something that was kind of my launch pad into public representation, and I had the good fortune to be elected to a role as a student leader at Acadia, and it was kind of my first experience with respect to student advocacy and a focus on the post-secondary sector, so it's certainly something that I'm interested in. I come across it humbly. I've also got solid backup here alongside the member for Northside Westmount, who I know has a significant background in the community college and post-secondary world, so we'll do our best to try and ask some good questions and hopefully get to dig a little deeper into the work that Minister Wong and his team at Advanced Ed are getting into. So with that, I'd like to start with in a similar place to the minister and focus a little bit on the mandate letter. The government continually highlights the milestones and the key elements of mandate letters across respective ministerial portfolios. So to kick things off, I did want to ask the minister to clarify if there was a 90-day timeline, or there was a timeline for completion of mandate-related tasks, and where that might be accessible for the public, or whether it's an internal document, perhaps, through the chair.
I recognize the Minister of Advanced Education.
On that. So we don't have anything official that we would produce as far as what our plans for within the mandate letter. What we are still and continue to work on, we have 9 months to do the review of the memorandum of understandings and the agreements with the universities. I had recently been updated on that. We continue to work on that, and once that is complete, I look forward to sharing that with you.
Oh, sorry. I recognize the honorable member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. So that's not something that we can expect to see at any point. We'll just have to kind of wait for updates that we may get whenever we get them, in contravention to what the first item on your mandate letter clearly lays out. It references quarterly updates in relation to the tasks at hand that your government has identified as priority. And I had honestly expected that that was something that we might be able to get our hands on. So can the minister comment on that through the chair?
I recognize the minister.
So we do have some items in our mandate that do have defined timelines, and some don't have defined timelines. However, what was set out in our business plan that was sent out yesterday do have our mandate items that are listed in there, and so that has been publicly shared. And my apologies for the confusion on the answer.
I recognize the honorable member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Thank you. Perhaps not necessarily on the fly, but the department and your staff could provide the specific timelines associated with the items that are laid out in the business plan. I do see start dates and years for commencement, but if there are timelines that the department and minister have defined, we'd appreciate seeing what those look like. Moving to another item on the mandate letter list, a focus on residency seats related to targeted placements based on specialties and defined needs. Can the minister comment on the work that's been done on that particular item, whether or not he and the department have defined what specialty areas should be focused on and what we might be able to see in terms of placements?
I recognize the minister.
Thank you for that question. So we do know that we need more doctors to really meet the vast healthcare needs of our growing and aging population. So we are proud to add 16 additional medical seats to our medical school at Dalhousie, which was in 2019-2020. Adding more seats helps us recruit and retain doctors and support more Mi'kmaq, Indigenous, African, Nova Scotian, and rural residents to become family doctors, which we so need. So we're also committed to making the financial and educational investments with medical students, like tuition and debt relief programs. So those programs, as far as trying to reach out to our diverse communities, we're actively working on that.
I recognize the honorable member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
So the minister references 16 seats added, 1920. Those are pre-existing seats, and the minister through the chair references debt relief and tuition relief, also pre-existing line items. I think even preceding our time in office. I'm wondering if the minister can can touch on some of the new, anything new that's been defined as a strategic priority for that group of professionals as we focus on healthcare as an important item.
I recognize the minister.
Family and rural doctors. Part of the Strategic Health Initiative is really to study that and to look at what we need it and where we need it. There are also 10 seats available at Dalhousie, and I'm not sure what the uptake on that is, but 10 seats for our Indigenous students and 10 seats for African Nova Scotia students. And that the focus is rural family medicine. Also, the 16 seats that you referred to was temporary funding. It's now been made permanent funding for those seats.
I recognize the honorable member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Excellent. Thank you for that clarification, Minister. Through the chair, another piece of the mandate letter that I wanted to try and identify if there were additional or expanded there's expanded work being done was the piece around sexual violence strategies on university campuses. I'm wondering what, and the minister in his opening remarks did indicate that these institutions did have these strategies in place, and that they do require some revision and revision's not the appropriate word, monitoring consistent every 3 years. So I'm wondering what the distinction for that particular item on the minister's mandate letter, what the distinction is there.
I recognize the minister.
Thank you for that question. So as you're well aware, this initiative really started under the former government. Under what we have done as a government is that we have now rolled this out, and it's going to be rolled out to the private career colleges as well. So there's significant funding that goes into it each year. There's $470,000 that go to the institutions in order for them to make sure that these policies are implemented. And we're looking forward to working with our private career colleges as we advance this very important endeavor.
I recognize the honorable member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
That's excellent news. It's amazing to hear that work is being continued. It's, I'm curious, in the past there have been grants associated with kind of self-made programming that would kind of fit the needs of individual institutions based on the needs of those institutions and personnel and people in those communities. That the funding that you've referenced, is that going to flow in a similar manner whereby these our private career colleges are able to put forward their own solutions, or is this a scenario where something will be applied by government to their respective organizations?
I recognize the Honourable Minister.
Here. So our private career colleges are private businesses. We don't have full control over anything that they do. But what we do and will offer is the experience and the programs and whatnot that are currently being offered at NSCC and our universities. Some of the things that we have in place are Waves of Change, which is a bystander intervention training. I'll just go through a few. Development of online resource toolkits for sexual violence education and prevention. Research and evaluation of university sexual violence policies. So constant review. So when we're talking about students, it is very different when you're dealing with NSCC universities as opposed to private institutions, but that expertise is already here. So,
I recognize the Honourable Member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. Is there any level of, like, one would think that most organizations would be on board with this without much encouragement? Does the minister have any concern related to the uptake of this initiative with our private career colleges?
So this is something that has been discussed with the private career colleges. They do have an association of all career colleges.
Order. I will recognize the Honourable Minister.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, next speaker. As I said, they do have an association. We do work with the association. We do work with the career colleges individually. And they're all different. They're from language schools to construction trades. We've had no pushback. We haven't heard from any of our colleges that they're not willing to work with us.
I recognize the Honourable Member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Thank you for that clarification. Moving on to the piece around the review of university charters and the governance structures. I did hear the words governance and compensation, and I'm wondering if the minister can provide the committee with some clarification on exactly what may go into that review and what the intended outcome might be. While Nova Scotia is, or while we do provide a tremendous amount of funding to our institutions, they are independent and do have their ability to make their own decisions. So I'm curious what the minister means by a governance review that involves a look at compensation.
I recognize the Honourable Minister.
Thank you, next speaker. So that is one of the items that we are currently working on, and I have recently been briefed on kind of the progress. We have 9 months to fulfill that obligation, and I will certainly have a full report on that. But really, we're going through them each individually. As you mentioned, they're independent institutions. We're looking for consistencies. We're looking for inconsistencies. We're looking at things that we feel are working really well, or maybe something that isn't working well. And so we're doing a full scan of what's out there right now, in hopes to improve things for students in the end. So as we continue to work on that and we get a final report, I'd look forward to sharing it.
I recognize the Honourable Member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. And I'm curious about the process and the activities that are taking place throughout the course of the next 9 months with respect to engaging the institutions. What sorts of personnel are involved? What type discussions are you folks having? Just my perspective is just to ensure that the universities are partners in accomplishing progress, rather than having the government produce a report that shows up in their lap and they're expected to adhere to. Through the chair.
I recognize the Honourable Minister.
Yeah, and thank you for that question. We have an incredible relationship with our university presidents. Through CONCEPT, the Council of Nova Scotia University Presidents, we work together on a number of initiatives, so we are in constant consultation and talks and brainstorming with our universities. It is our staff, advanced education staff, that is conducting the review. But I can assure you that it's all in the best interest of making it better for students, for Nova Scotians, to really move forward together. And that is the whole feeling that I get when I speak to the university presidents. And CONCEPT is an amazing organization who's doing fabulous work. And so the review of this is something we do together.
I recognize the Honourable Member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Through the chair, thank you to the minister for that response. When this is all comes to a conclusion, and does the minister foresee a set of recommendations? Are there going to be items that are defined to-dos by the minister under the authority of the minister? Or is this kind of, this is what we've learned, here are some recommendations? I guess I'm trying to understand what once we get to that point of the end case scenario, at the end of this 9 months, what can the public, what can universities, what can we expect to see in the way of directives or recommendations? Through the chair.
I recognize the Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. At the end of the day, we want the student experience to be the best possible experience. So we are actually looking at our partnership. There is regulation. There is legislation out there. We will have recommendations at the end of it. But at the end of the day, we are truly looking to improve the experience of students that go to our Nova Scotia universities.
I recognize the Honourable Member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
So I am hearing collaboration. I'm also hearing regulation and legislation. So as the minister has indicated, and I know is exemplified through the work of the department, that if that scenario takes place where legislative and regulatory changes a scenario that we get to, that the institutions will be brought along for the ride as collaborators rather than seeing something as a surprise. And ultimately, I know the students are at the heart of the work that goes in from both parties. Co-op education. I'm moving along here, I think. I'm wondering if the co-op education program is to be maintained, expanded. I know that it's been oversubscribed year over year for a couple of years, and a couple of years at least, and I know the importance of paid co-op placements to students, not only in terms of recognizing the important work that they're doing, but also from making ends meet and the affordability of school and other financial priorities. So I'm wondering what the minister can tell us about the future of the co-op program at Advanced Ed, through the chair.
I recognize the Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the co-op program is something that I 100% believe in. Work integrated learning is a key mechanism in attaching students to the workforce. And I believe that the more we have, that means the more opportunity that students have to test drive a career path. They may love it or they may hate it, and it's the time to do it. And co-op, as it's defined, is really, they're paid positions. There are some inconsistencies across the university sector in the way that they're offered. Some are offered for credits, some are offered as non-credits, some are take 3 courses and get 2 credits, but they are important nonetheless. We also have a list of programs that we offer under advanced education, such as what we offer through MyTax. I have a whole page that I could go through, but I'm quite sure you're familiar with it. The traditional co-op program offered through the universities is actually governed through labor skills and immigration. But we do work together in order to make sure that the programming is as best as it possibly can be. But please rest assured that we are looking at better ways to utilize worker integrated learning. Co-op is a big piece of that.
I recognize the Honourable Member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
So just for greater certainty, through the chair, it would be best suited to ask your counterpart at Labor Skills and Immigration about whether or not that program, that co-op program, is going to be expanded or increased levels of funding were going to be applied.
I recognize the Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. My hope would be that we could expand the program, but it is something that we are still looking at. It is every part of me, from my background working with experiential education, would be that if we could at all expand the program and work with our universities, work with the private sector, work with the public sector, my desire would be to expand the program. That's not saying that that's going to happen overnight, but it is something that we are certainly looking at. As a matter of fact, through LSI, our Graduate Opportunity Program is oversubscribed as we speak.
I recognize the Honourable Member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Thank you for that, through the chair, thank you for that response. And I'll jump ahead a little bit since you referenced a program that I was going to ask about. What can the minister tell us about the future of the Graduate to Opportunities program, for example?
I recognize the Honourable Minister.
So thank you for that question. And as I just mentioned, I am familiar with the program, but that does lie with Labor Skills and Immigration, so I would leave any response to that to them.
I recognize the Honourable Member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
And Innovate to Opportunities would fall into the same category.
I recognize the Minister.
That is correct.
I recognize the Honourable Member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Okay, let's jump back into my regular batting order here and talk a little bit about student assistance. We've had, and I know the minister's met with organizations like the CFS Students Nova Scotia and other student-led entities throughout the province, and one glaring fact comes to mind is that And this can be referenced in Student Nova Scotia most recent publication for their advocacy week. 15% of students still have on student assistance. 15% of students on student assistance still have unmet need, and the minister referenced an update to the weekly amount for student assistance, I believe, in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. So can the minister provide some commentary, because when I look at the student assistance budget, I only see what I would consider comparatively a modest investment or upgrade to student assistance, and perhaps what is being done to what was done to evaluate that, get to that amount, considering there is that much unmet need that is expressed out there.
I recognize the Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mick Speaker. That increase was certainly under your government when you did that in 2018. It was previously at $180, and it had been increased to $200. So the increases that you do see there, a chunk of that money is part of the disability supports that we have, and we had more students that really took advantage of that. That's a very good news story that we're spending more money on students that feel comfortable to go into our post-secondary system. Also through the repayment assistance program, which is really a debt management tool to help students repay their loans at a rate that's more comfortable for them. And the variance in that was $1.1 million.
I recognize the Honourable Member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
So the addition, through the chair, so the additional student assistance funding that can be cited for the record is what we see here. That's like, is that there's been no I guess look at updating the weekly amount to reflect a present day need. To the chair.
I recognize the Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mick Speaker.
I recognize the Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mick Speaker. So the weekly rate has not changed in this budget, and as I said, we are just starting. However, this year alone, we did put $9.8 million COVID grant that gave to every student that had Nova Scotia student assistance. That worked out to $875 per student, and we also have, and it has been there through your government, was every Nova Scotia student at a Nova Scotia university receives that bursary of $1,283 to reduce that cost of tuition. That continues to be there. We have non-repayable loans. We have student grants. A student can write up to 40% of their Nova Scotia student loan. As a matter of fact, a student with the highest needs at the end of their program could have up to $40,000 of students' assistance that they do not have to repay. So there are systems there. Are they adequate? Could we always do more? Of course we could always do more. But as I said, this is the beginning for us. The best interests of students are always first and foremost, and we look forward to helping students in any way that we can moving forward.
I recognize the honourable member for Hammonds Plains Lucasville.
Yeah, through the chair, I will acknowledge that one-time grant is, it was a specific ask from Students Nova Scotia, so I think it's important to note that's, to me, that's a demonstration that the government is listening to this particular group of students and trying to complement needs on the fly. But I will also add the importance of sustained support, issues related to the highest tuition in the country. I think that we've got, it's like 13 of 15 of our universities our universities are all in the top 13 of the highest tuition rates in the country for undergrad. And we're now hearing more and more about student housing, so I hope that perhaps the minister can allude to some future sustained financial assistance changes that will have kind of a more capable effect than what I'm sure was a very important one-time grant. Through the chair.
I recognize the honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are working, and we've been in for 7 months. We have roundtable discussions with staff, with students, with post-secondary leaders, and we're working on really creative solutions to help make post-secondary education doable for more students with less stress, to be able to get through their studies, to get a job here in Nova Scotia, to stay here in Nova Scotia, to raise their families here in Nova Scotia. We still have a ways to go. Some of those ideas, once they come across, we do want feedback. We want feedback from students. We want feedback from opposition. We want feedback so that we can have the best plan going forward. Because in order to build a plan that's going to work, we need to listen to what everybody has to say.
I recognize the honourable member for Hammonds Plains Lucasville.
Thank you for that, and it's important to have those discussions and consider solutions from a around the table perspective. Does the minister think that updating the weekly amount is going to be something that students can look forward to in the first half of his mandate, perhaps?
I recognize the honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Everything is on the table, and that is the truth. So, but we did get elected on fixing healthcare. That's not saying that our post-secondary institutions, that doesn't mean that our students are going to take a back seat, but we are doing everything that we possibly can to make lives of Nova Scotians better. And students is under advanced education. And I will do everything in my power to make sure that students can afford to go to university, to community college, and to our private career colleges. We have top-notch, internationally recognized institutions, right from one end of this province to the other. We're attracting international students. We're attracting instructors, professors to come to these institutions because of their reputation. And I will do everything that I possibly can to make it work.
I recognize the honourable member for Hammonds Plains Lucasville.
Thank you, and hearing that statement, that's great to hear. I know that the minister, again, as I said earlier on, I know the minister's heart's in the right place with this file. And speaking about, the commitments around healthcare and international students. There is an age-old agenda item since my days in the student advocacy world related to MSI coverage for international students. And given that the government has such a strong priority around healthcare and the minister's department has a focus on international students, I'm wondering if the minister can provide some comments on the request for MSI coverage for international students.
I recognize the Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for that question. You and I have had that conversation. We have had the conversation with Students of Nova Scotia, Canada Federation of Students. Some student unions have also brought that up. It's important that we welcome international students into our schools, into our communities, make them feel part of Nova Scotia, because we want them to stay here. We want them to work here. We want them to raise their families here. So MSI coverage is certainly part of that mix that could potentially help them. However, in conversations with all of our stakeholders, sometimes there are more priorities than what the MSI could potentially bring. But we have had conversations with the Department of Health and Wellness about potentially changing the coverage. We have looked at what other provinces are doing. We're on par with some, and maybe we're behind on others. But there are several different pieces to that that we're looking at. And I'm not saying that we will or that we won't. But what I am certainly saying is that we're going to act in the best interest of students. And if that's something that we can fit into our mix, then that'll certainly be up for discussion.
The Honourable Member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Thank you, Mix Chair. Along the lines of supporting international students, one of the communicated challenges, and again along the lines of, I guess, affordability is where I've put this. Some expressed concern around the cap that exists on how much international students can work in the province, and I'm wondering what the minister has heard with respect to that particular item, and what perhaps changes might be deployed to enable international students to work more, to make education more affordable for them.
I recognize the Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for that question. When we talk about affordability and for international students, and one of the things that they need to do is, for a lot of them, not all of them, but they do need to work. And a lot of them can find work. And depending on how many weeks they're here, whether they're here for the summer or whether they travel. But as a matter of fact, just a few weeks ago, I met with a group of Mount St. Vincent University students. There were some international students in the mix, and that exact question came up. And international students can work a maximum of 20 hours per week in order to try to help fund their studies. So we did take that question back, and we asked the question to Labor Skills and Immigration, and it's also having to work with our federal counterparts in order to make that work. So I did have a neater note. It was right at the top of my head, isn't it? So we are working towards that.
I recognize the Honourable Member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Thank you, and I'm grateful for that response, and that you're meeting with my classmates at Mount St. Vincent. I had to be excused from class tonight to join you all this evening, but I'm here and glad to be here, and glad to hear that you're consulting with Mount St. Vincent students alike. On to the question of open education resources. Students Nova Scotia had presented what I observed to be a pretty reasonable ask that could have an important effect on students' ability to get the information that they need vis-a-vis textbooks. So I'm wondering how that, I know that the minister is aware of it, so I'm wondering how those discussions have gone and what might be in store for that particular initiative.
I recognize the Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you for that question. And we had a discussion about open education resources as well when we met. That is a question that we have brought up to every university president, every student group that we have spoken to. We understand that it is important to reduce costs for students. There's been, multiple examples of students spending $250 for a textbook, and they may use one chapter. But as you know, CAL had, our university librarians, had a pilot project, and that was quite successful. And we had looked at the results in that, and that is certainly something that the individual institutions are looking at progressing, and we are looking as well to work with the universities and our post-secondary sector in order to try to get open education resources more available to students.
I recognize the Honourable Member for Hemmons Plains, Lucasville.
So just to clarify, it sounds like the minister's indicating that the institutions are going to take lead to facilitate this objective. I guess how do we track that to ensure that progress is being made and that what is, one would observe to be comparatively a pretty modest investment that would have a particular effect, a positive effect on a student's bottom line. How do we ensure that yardstick keeps getting moved?
I recognize the Honourable Minister.
So I apologize if I left you with the impression that all universities and presidents were working towards this. Right now, what we're trying to do is define exactly what is needed, and we haven't made a yardstick yet. But as I said, we are in conversations. We realize it's important to students, and we will eventually set some parameters and hopefully have a yardstick that we can measure it against.
I recognize the Honourable Member for Hemmons Plains, Lucasville.
Thank you for that response. I'm wondering, shifting gears, given the conflict that we're seeing in the Ukraine, I'm wondering if the minister has had much discussion with our institutions around bringing in students from that part of the world. I guess just generally speaking, where do you see the minds of our institutions with respect to bringing in folks through the education stream in Nova Scotia, if that's something that's on the table?
I recognize the Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our department directly, we've had casual conversations, but this is really under Labor, Skills and Immigration, who also look after Genova. What they are working on is really trying to expedite students and families coming into Nova Scotia. But really, even if we do get any of Ukrainians that come into Nova Scotia, they're not ready to go to school. But what we need to do is make sure that we welcome them into Nova Scotia and make them comfortable and give them what they need. Education is probably not top of mind right away, but we are open and we are willing to help out in any way we can.
I recognize the honourable member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Thank you, and I appreciate that support and that consideration. I know that I would agree it's probably not the first thing on their mind, but we only have so many tools that are in our tool belt to try and support, and one of them is a direct line through the education system that I would suggest is a little more simple than others. Shifting gears again, I'm wondering if the department has any role, initiatives work towards with the intent to streamline in-migration of various professionals, and I'll add some context here. So for example, I've spoken to an individual who was a certified EMT in the state of Pennsylvania, and we have a former Minister of Health affiliated with DAL, Dr. Ron Stewart, who was the medical director of the paramedic system in Pennsylvania. And when this person came to Nova Scotia as a registered EMT, was unable to jump into a role in our paramedic system. I think of another individual I met with who was a 15-year Star Tech with the military, doing search and rescue missions, providing emergency pre-hospital care on the fly, that was told he had to go back to school to upgrade when he wanted to transfer into civilian work. So in that context, does advanced education play a role in creating a more seamless environment for families and individuals to transition into the workforce here in Nova Scotia if they want to make Nova Scotia their home?
I recognize the honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll eventually get used to waiting for you before I start speaking. That is something that's very important to our government. But what you're asking really falls under labor skills in immigrations for credentialing and matching of programming and what's needed. But I will tell you a personal story. In my role as a principal of an experiential high school and an adult high school, we had a 46-year-old gentleman that came back to school to get his grade 12. And this story really revolves around, we also need to work with private enterprise and whatnot. But this person was a welder. He was a blacksmith. He had his own YouTube channel with over 100,000 viewers. He worked for almost 3 decades in what he did. He was an expert. And he couldn't get a job because he didn't have a high school diploma. So we have a long ways to go when we're looking at micro-credentials, looking at prior learning, not just for the education system and not just for government, but out there in private industry and whatnot as well. So, but it is something that is important to our government to make sure that when people come into the province from wherever they come, if they're from a different province or a different country, that we give them credit where credit is due.
I would just like to remind the honourable member that you have 5 minutes left. I recognize the honourable member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. Through you, a couple of different occasions we've heard, even in the budget address itself, we've heard the engagement that the Premier undertook to reach out to nursing students, and what an important activity that was to engage nursing students. We subsequently heard the financial support that was contributed to address an unmet need with that particular group of students, and more recently, Dal nursing students were called to take on what I would consider to be a bit of a forced role. I know that there's some time and a place scenario given the COVID world that we're in, and they were kind of called to service. But if it's so important, that milestone around the Premier meeting with nursing students and the subsequent decision to help them meet a financial need that was observed as a problem, I guess my concern is that they were called to action and provided what could only be described as a less than minimum wage equivalent to do this work in our long-term care facilities. And I'm wondering if the minister can comment on whether he thinks it's appropriate that these same students make the equivalent of $6 an hour to do this work.
I recognize the Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mick Speaker. You know what, that was a time in our history, a time and place, a time of COVID, that really the province called upon nursing students to really help out in a situation where they were really needed. A lot of the nursing students for their clinical placements, they were actually canceled. So a lot of the nursing students would not have been able to graduate on time, potentially not graduate on time because their clinical placements were canceled. In addition, when they do their placements, they're not paid placements. They're placements that they do as part of their education. So the Premier felt that it was very important, since nursing students across the province stepped up and helped out, that wanted to show them some gratitude, and $1,000 to help them along the way was very much well received. And we were so appreciative of the nursing students, the instructors, the clinical instructors that stepped in. It was well received by the long-term care facilities that they were in, by the students themselves, faculty. So it wasn't meant to be a wage. It was simply meant to show our appreciation.
I recognize the Honourable Member for Hamlin's Plains, Lucasville, with 2 minutes left.
Yeah, I guess I would just suggest that my conversations went a little bit differently with nursing students related to concerns around around circumventing a mandatory component to their training and their certification that, I mean, they were supposed to be focusing on acute and mental health care, which I guess I only have a minute left here, so perhaps the minister can comment on whether or not he believes it's okay that they had to forego this critical element of their training.
I recognize the Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I mentioned, some of the nursing students wouldn't have been able to finish their program on time had they waited maybe till now to start their clinical placements. But they did meet the competencies. They did meet the educational outcomes that they...
Order. The time for questions from the official opposition has ended. I'd now like to move for a 5-minute recess before we move on to the next set of questions.
Order, please. Thank you. My name's David Ritzy. I'm the MLA for Truro, Bible Hill, Millbrook, and Salmon River, and I'll be chairing the second half of this subcommittee. So I'm going to start with the NDP now, and the current time is 9:31. I recognize the member for Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island.
Thank you. I'm excited to have changed spots and get a little more into the conversation. And I think, the minister, you and I have had through the chair, sorry, the minister and I have had a chance to meet before, and and I've been able to share my passion for post-secondary education. So I'm actually still a student. I'm completing my PhD in health at Dalhousie University this year. That's now I'm on the record, so it's going to happen. Prior to that, I was a sessional instructor at Dalhousie University. I managed a national research project, and I've been involved in a number of large national research and international research collaborations. So I'm also a parent trying to transition some kids into post-secondary education. And I have 4 universities in my riding and thousands of students, staff, administration, and faculty. So obviously this is near and dear to my heart. So I have a few questions to go through, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation tonight. So I might just start sort of where the Honourable Member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville left off, or close to that. But again, on the question of tuition fees. So Nova Scotian students, undergraduate Nova Scotian students, have paid the highest tuition fees of any province in the country for the last couple of years, and the average being $9,028. The loan forgiveness program provides some relief, but students who are in graduate, professional programs, students who take longer than 5 years to complete their degree, or students who don't complete their degree don't qualify. So the Students Nova Scotia 2021 Advocacy Week document noted that average tuition costs have increased by 16.9% since 2017. So can the minister please comment, through you, can the minister comment on the current approach to tuition fees in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Advanced Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So really, as I mentioned before, thank you for the question, by the way. Students really at the forefront of absolutely everything that we do. Tuition, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. So I have a son who's graduating this year. He's been accepted to NSCC Ivany Campus for business at approximately $3,700 a year, or he can go to Dalhousie at $9,300 a year. And it's, for me, it's a no-brainer because I'm paying for it. But it absolutely is an obstacle, and we understand that tuition fees, along with everything else, is an obstacle for a lot of students. We have really maintained the status quo of what was there before, but I just want to assure you that this is the very first 7 months of my mandate. And we are going to continue to work with the post-secondary institutions, all students and all stakeholders, to try to find ways to make it more accessible for all students. I do realize that the weekly rate has not been increased.
However, there are, if students, depending on where they fit and what their needs are, when they finish their program and the programs that they do, there are better solutions for some than others. It's not always equitable, it's not always fair. But that's why we're having these conversations now. And I appreciate the questions because it gives us more thought in order to dig deep. So I look forward to continuing the conversations with you and truly moving this forward and trying to make it more affordable for students.
I recognize the member for Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island.
Is the goal to reduce tuition or freeze tuition in Nova Scotia?
I recognize the Minister of Advanced Education.
So we don't have one particular goal over the other right now, but we are in conversations. And like I say, 7 months in, we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot by talking directly to students, by talking to you, by talking to members of every party. And all of our stakeholders. So as we continue to learn and put the information together and really try to find the best way forward. There are some creative solutions out there. There's some creative solutions in other jurisdictions that, I don't think that we've really considered. So we are delving into some of those, and once we get to a point where we can narrow it down to a few, I'm looking forward to having conversations. So.
I recognize the member for Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island.
And so does this year's budget include an increase or decrease in operating funds for post-secondary institutions, taking into account an approximate inflation rate of 5%?
I recognize the Minister of Advanced Education.
1%. So written into the MOUs that will expire in 2024, there's a 1% increase to the university's operating funds. And so that's what's reflected in the budget.
I recognize the member for Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island.
So I guess along with student assistance, operating costs are not keeping up. The operating budget is not keeping up with inflation for post-secondary institutions in Nova Scotia. I referenced the recent announcement of $65 million in deferred maintenance investments at four rural universities. And I know from my conversations, as you know, I've met with Concept and done a bit of a university tour myself, so I certainly know the pressures on institutions around deferred maintenance. Can the minister please explain how the institutions were chosen and what's the plan for other institutions who continue to have deferred maintenance challenges?
I recognize the Minister of Advanced Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we were very pleased to offer, 4 universities some help with their deferred maintenance. And what our universities are they're the mechanism that's going to educate students that are going to enter the workforce, that are going to have families here. It's going to increase our population. So for us to thrive as an economy, our universities are at the very forefront of that. So if we can assist them at all, we will. So in your specific question on how we chose the universities, not only do we want our immigration and to happen right here just in the metro area, we want to make sure that our communities outside of here will thrive as well. And the wonderful thing about our rural universities is that they are communities. They're within communities, and communities need to be able to grow culturally, size-wise, population, infrastructure-wise, with everything that we're doing and everything we want to do as a government. So by helping out rural universities, it allows them to focus on other things. It allows them to focus on better programming for students, better facilities for students. Cape Breton University does an exceptional job, and all universities do a good job, some better than others, on attracting international students, students from other provinces. International students that are going to Cape Breton, they want to stay in Cape Breton. If they can stay there, find jobs there, raise families there, buy houses there, eventually they will, then that's positive. That's what we're looking for.
I recognize the member for Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island.
And certainly, I recognize the value of universities across the province. So, as you know, I have a strong connection to the Annapolis Valley. I went to high school in Canning, and certainly my experience and my family's experience has always been enriched by the presence of Acadia University, for instance, in Wolfville. So I totally understand, the positive impact. But I'm wondering if you can share. What sort of evidence was brought to bear? So what information, what specific information did you use or do you have access to that tracks the pathway, perhaps offers some idea of the financial implications of students to residents? Does that sort of, for lack of a better word, does that pipeline exist in Nova Scotia, and how did you investigate that?
I recognize the Minister of Advanced Education.
My apologies, but could you please clarify that question for me? Sorry.
I recognize the member for Halifax, Citadel, and Sable Island.
So how do you know that students who study at a rural university will choose to stay in that rural community? What evidence do you have that that happens in Nova Scotia?
I recognize the Minister of Advanced Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I actually said that, then I misspoke. I believe what I said is that from talking to university leadership, talking to students and whatnot, I was specific to Cape Breton. A lot of their students want to stay. No, there's really no indication that a student that may go to Acadia University doesn't want to move to Halifax or want to move to Toronto. But what does happen is that we become attached to the school. My first university degree, and by the way, I've gone to a lot of universities in Nova Scotia. You know what? That's where my real attachment is. That's where I met lifelong friends and went through experiences and stuff together. And it was a small university, but you know what? I also have went to Mount St. Vincent and Dalhousie University. I've done courses at St. Mary's University. I've been to University of St. Anne. The only places I don't think I've been is probably St. FX and Cape Breton University. I should do a couple of courses there just to say I've done it. But I do believe that all of our universities, they're different. They offer students a different experience. And that's why students choose to go to St. Mary's or Cape Breton or University of St. Anne. And that's the richness of what we have. I look at our post-secondary system, our university sector, a huge asset to Nova Scotia. So where students are going to be, you know what? We have to create the environment. As a government, we have to create the environment where students will want to stay in Nova Scotia. And I talked earlier about the co-op programs or the work integrated learning programs. I think the more we can connect students while they're still in school to the workforce through work integrated learning, the better opportunity we have of keeping them right here in Nova Scotia. We're not going to keep every student here in Nova Scotia, but I think we can do a darn good job at doing it. I mean, our population is increasing. If you look at Wolfville right now, it's one of the fastest growing towns in Nova Scotia. And one of the big reasons is because they're alumni. They're alumni that went to Acadia, lived in Wolfville, and they want to retire there.
I recognize the member for Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island.
And so, as you know, from your tour of universities, I'm sure you were shared the same information at other universities like St. Mary's and Dalhousie, where and other, NESCAD and the Mount also come to mind, where there are ongoing deferred maintenance needs. And I think, I think universities in HRM would student attendance is enrollment is increasing. And really HRM is also growing. So so they would probably make the same argument about some of the rural universities in terms of student population growth and other population growth. So what is the plan for addressing the ongoing deferred maintenance needs at other universities?
I recognize the Minister of Advanced Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for that question. As you know, as our university sector, they are all independently board-governed institutions, and they really do. They're the ones that make the decision about deferred maintenance, and so they make decisions whether or not they put money into deferred maintenance, or they offer a program, or they offer something else for students. But it is really up to them. What is wonderful about the announcement that we made, that it was a big shot in the arm for those universities that received it. Had we spread that out amongst 6 other universities, it would have really decreased the effect and the shot in the arm that they really needed. This is our first 7 months here. There's still more to come from us to help universities in different ways. Maybe deferred maintenance, maybe programming, maybe a variety of things. But this is the first kick at the can for us. And we're very pleased to be able to give a good shot in the arm to those 4 universities.
I recognize the member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Island.
I'd like to return to some of the questioning from the honourable member from Hammonds Plains, Lucasville, around, the part of your mandate letter, the part of the minister's mandate letter that refers to reviewing the acts and charters of all post-secondary institutions in Nova Scotia. And, and I know that the member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville, asked a number of questions, but I still can't get it. So I still don't understand what the goal is. This is a huge undertaking that, maybe people haven't said it to the minister, but people have definitely said it to me. It's causing consternation amongst university leadership. So what is the goal of this project?
I recognize the Minister of Advanced Education. Recognize the Minister of Advanced Education.
Thank you. Could you hear that conversation? You could. So I've had conversations with all of the university presidents. I met with Concept several times. I've not heard the same fear, so I'm not sure if you spoke to them before I had an opportunity to speak to them or not. But more specifically, so we are certainly doing an inventory of all the acts, the legislation and the policies. We are looking at the size of boards. We're looking at things that we hope can improve the student experience. We want to make sure that once we do a jurisdictional scan, that maybe there's some commonalities there. So maybe there are things that are similar that will help other schools, or maybe there are things that aren't working. So it is certainly a jurisdictional scan, and of all the items that I just mentioned, and we have 9 months to do so. It's a big task, and we've had staff working on it since the very beginning, and it is collaborative, and we're having great conversations with people. And I truly look forward to sharing our findings at the 9-month period.
I recognize the member for Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island.
Thank you. And so the minister has referred to this process as collaborative. So I'm wondering if the minister can elaborate on that and what that means. Is there a standing committee that's meeting? Are there terms of reference? How are concept and/or university administrations and students, faculty being brought into this conversation and this review?
I recognize the Minister of Advanced Education.
Thank you for that question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So as I mentioned earlier, we have spoken with Concept. We have consulted with the administration at the universities. This is a conversation we've also had with students of Nova Scotia. The student groups are very well aware that this is underway. It is the team at Advanced Education that is in charge of putting this together. And so as when I say that we have been consulting, we have been consulting, and it is collaborative.
I recognize the member for Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island.
I guess, I appreciate the answer from the minister. I guess when I think about, when you talk about a collaborative project, I think about things like a shared document that people might have a chance to review, that sets out the goals and sort of a project charter, why this is being undertaken, how it will be undertaken, and, roles and responsibilities. So I don't know if that's part of the conversation or not, and perhaps the minister can clarify. But I'm wondering, so, is the minister considering a single university act?
I recognize the Minister of Advanced Education.
I'm not considering a single university. I mentioned earlier, our 10 universities are assets. They all have their own unique personality. They attract a certain type of student. To not have the universities have their identity would be a travesty to what has been grown here. Those communities, if you look at the individual communities where universities are sitting, they have their own identity within that community. And to destroy that would be, that would take us backwards. That would not help us achieve our rigorous goals of really growing the economy, increasing our population, make sure that we have people doing the jobs of today and tomorrow. So we appreciate the work that the universities do, their individual independent board of governors, and look forward to long-lasting relationships with each one of them.
I recognize the member for Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island.
Thank you, and I certainly appreciate that perspective. So as you know, I'm a perennial student, so my undergrad, when I was involved in student union organizing in Nova Scotia, the topic of whether there would be a University of Nova Scotia was a fairly common topic. But at the same time, the one thing that did emerge during that period was a number of program amalgamations or rationalizations. And I'm wondering if the minister can comment on whether that's part of the work that's being undertaken.
I recognize the Minister of Advanced Education.
Thank you. So to answer, thank you. So to answer part of that question, the program inventory is certainly not part of this phase. But what I will say, there's already collaboration going on within the universities. I mean, if you look at University St. Anne has schools in Halifax. They are looking to and sort of working with St. Mary's University to an extent. We met with the Atlantic School of Theology, and they're also, St. Mary's happens to be somebody that they're partnering with. So across university, they're doing it themselves because they know that at the end of the day, it's in the best interest of students, and the more that they can collaborate and work together, the better off that everybody is. The thing I mentioned earlier about, there's an awful lot of university students that are doing coursework and stuff at NSCC and vice versa. So this is already starting to happen naturally without, having to have government intervention. But my personal opinion is that, the more that we can align things and have schools work together, the better off it is, the better off everybody will be for it.
I recognize the member for Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island.
The minister has spoken a lot about centering the student experience and putting the student at the center of the discussion about advanced education in Nova Scotia. So switching gears a little bit, and it's already been referenced tonight, the government has announced new NSCC residences at 3 campuses, and absolutely good news, absolutely needed. I did have someone approach me and ask me about the affordability of those residences, and they quoted a number that would seem to imply that students would pay $800 to $1,000 per month for a room. I don't know if that's been determined yet. So I'm wondering if the minister can explain what work is being done to ensure that the residences are affordable.
I recognize the Minister of Advanced Education.
Thank you for that question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the conversations around really of course, it's not been determined yet, but NSCC does work on a cost recovery model and really have to balance out, to determine what the rates are going to be with whatever they need to recover their costs. So.
I recognize the member for Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island.
And I'm just wondering if I can clarify through the minister if the government, as an investor in this project, is part of the conversations about the affordability of the new residences.
I recognize the Minister of Advanced Education.
So that is absolutely part of the conversation for all our student experiences. We are having conversations. As I said, NSCC works on a cost recovery model, and so we're not there yet. So really, it was just announced and it was just approved to go ahead with the project, and so we're just not there yet.
I recognize the member for Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island.
And so I know that, and certainly the minister has spoken passionately about co-op placements, about the skilled trades, and I know a number of these initiatives are perhaps shared, or the responsibility is shared with other departments like labor, skills, and immigration. But I have a few questions about that work. So in the Conservatives' platform from this past summer, There was a reference to a program called the Jill of All Trades events for teen girls, where students can attend a full day of hands-on workshops and connect with women who are currently working in the trades. With a commitment to bring this model to Nova Scotia through the NSCC and other partner organizations, and it was costed at $42,000. I assume that's annual. So just wondering if this program is indeed in the budget.
I recognize the Minister for Advanced Education.
Thank you for the question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So when we talk about co-op programs or we talk about any type of work integrated learning program, I mean, I do back that 100%. And as I mentioned earlier, the earlier that we can get students attached to the workforce, whether it's skilled trades or otherwise, it's always a good thing. We did a video session with a trades class at Marconi campus, actually. And there were several women in the program that went through the, is it women? Thank you. Through the Women Unlimited program, which is managed through Labor Skills and Immigration. They thought it was a wonderful program that gave them the opportunity to test out the skilled trades and really looking forward to graduating. And they came from diverse backgrounds as well. And some of the women were mothers, had come from different jobs. So that stuff is very important to me. But the program that you're referring to specifically is under Labor Skills and Immigration, and I will defer that to them.
I recognize the member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Allen.
Thank you. I believe the minister and I have had a chance to talk about these issues before. And so wondering if for this government, if pathway programs, so programs that encourage the entry of traditionally underrepresented groups into different educational programs is a priority for the department. So whether that's based on gender diversity, I also think about first generation newcomers, Indigenous students, African Nova Scotian students. So is there a commitment from the government to look at and encourage pathway programs at all institutions?
I recognize the Minister for Advanced Education.
Thank you for that question. And we do have a number of programs, I did have to reach over to grab the list of some of the things that we're doing. One of the things right off the top of my mind was very early on, and unfortunately I couldn't make the ceremony, but the Unimaki PTEC program that we have in Cape Breton, where it's really taking high school students and combining NSCC to get these students involved in technology. And that's a wonderful program that's geared towards our Mi'kmaq populations. We have the African Nova Scotian Early Childhood Educators program at NSCC. We have a Mi'kmaq Masters in Social Work program. Dalhousie Medical Sciences has African Nova Scotian and Mi'kmaq cohorts. We also have a Mi'kmaq and Indigenous students in nursing program. We also have an Indigenous Black and Mi'kmaq initiative at Dalhousie Schulich School of Law, and we have the Dalhousie Transition Year program.
I recognize the member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Allen.
And I mean, a number of those programs have been in existence for a very long time, such as the IBM program and the transition year program at Dalhousie. And so wondering, are there new programs that the government would like to see, or is the government proposing areas where these programs are needed?
I recognize the Minister for Advanced Education.
Thank you for the question. So all our post-secondary have, diversity, inclusion, and equity programs, and I'm sure you're aware of that. But for our Mi'kmaq and our Indigenous post-secondary students, we've included all of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action and the 13 principles of Indigenous education and post-secondary mandate statements. And we're looking to improve and increase the collection of Mi'kmaq and Indigenous student data and research, increase the availability of cultural safe spaces to positively impact Indigenous student health and well-being and post-secondary success, build capacity to connect with Mi'kmaq communities in Nova Scotia, enhancing the availability of Mi'kmaq language courses and teaching Mi'kmaq language certificates, and recognition of prior learning for trades.
I recognize the member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Island.
Thank you. And I mean, I think it's always really important to ask ourselves each and every day how our work contributes to responding to the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So I'm really, pleased to hear that reference in the minister's remarks. I'm wondering if there is new funding being provided in this budget to support the TRC calls to action, in particular call to action number 16 that talks about the need to create university and college degree and diploma programs in traditional languages.
I recognize the Minister for Advanced Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, and thank you for your question. So the first time tonight, I'm going to say you stumped me. So we don't have anything in the budget for that, but thank you for that question. But that is certainly something we'll take forward for consideration.
I recognize the member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Island.
And I thank the minister for his answer, and I guess I would encourage the department to look at how to actually substantiate and fund the commitment to implementing the calls to action from the TRC. As you know, it's great to have priorities, but if you don't fund them, they don't get done. And if they're not written down, then no one's going to measure them. So I certainly appreciate the commitment, but I think, would like to see action, and particularly action in the way of funding. On another perhaps missing mandate, so many of the members who are present tonight would have heard me talk about the fact that there is nothing in any information currently from this current government in Nova Scotia about how the government will support members of the 2S LGBTQ plus communities. There's nothing in the platform, there's nothing in the speech on the throne, there's nothing that I found in the budget except for one throwaway line about including same-sex couples in another file. And so I'm wondering, and I don't know if you, I hope, Minister, that you had a chance, or I hope the Minister had a chance to receive and review a letter that I sent to the majority of cabinet ministers and the Premier, calling upon the Minister and his colleagues to consider how their department can support the development and flourishment of the 2S LGBT communities in Nova Scotia. So I'm wondering if the Minister can explain what work advanced education is doing to support 2S LGBTQ plus students and faculty.
I recognize the Minister for Advanced Education.
Thank you for the question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I mentioned earlier, that all the universities have their own departments of diversity, equity, and inclusion, you know, they do work independently on the programs and stuff that they do put forward.
I recognize the member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Allen.
So I do have a follow-up question to that, and then maybe I'll also launch my next question just to limit the back and forth a little bit. And so I just wanted to ask the Minister to confirm that there's no budget allocation that supports 2S LGBTQ plus students in the Department of Advanced Education's budget. And then moving on to another group of students that are near and dear to my heart, that you know, I've done a lot of work with over the years, is the issue of supporting people to attend post-secondary education who were formerly in the care of the province. And so a number of universities have taken it upon themselves to offer tuition waivers to former youth in care. I think, you know, I think there should be I guess it's my opinion, my goal, that there would be a province-wide approach to this, that this is one area, like, for instance, mandating sexual violence policies or other things where the government could have a role, particularly having been the guardian of these young people, to help them transition to the next stage in life. So I'm wondering if the Minister can explain also what work is underway on supporting former youth in care to attain post-secondary education.
I recognize the Minister for Advanced Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the question. So youth in care, youth at risk, that's, I hang my hat on being principal of an alternative high school for 12 years. Not all the youth were in care, but you know, we had lots that went through our doors. They all have challenges, different challenges that, unless we're in care or very close to people in care, or somebody like yourself that was a host, probably wouldn't understand everything that they go through. I think it's important that they do have the opportunity for post-secondary education. Community service, I believe, does a pretty good job at wrapping themselves around those kids and ensuring that the pathway is available to them. But it was very heartwarming to see when, you know, the first university opened their doors to students that had been in care.
I recognize the member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Allen.
I want to switch gears again, and I have a few minutes remaining, and then I'm going to offer some time to the honourable member from Cumberland North. So I wanted to talk a bit about Research Nova Scotia. So in many ways, Research Nova Scotia also does what I consider very important work in the province. So, you know, for those who maybe aren't as familiar with Research Nova Scotia, it's actually a newly created organizational, I can't remember, 2018 or 19, I can't remember the exact year, but is really intended to do a couple things. So one is to support researchers and institutions in Nova Scotia be part of the national and international conversations about research. So often, for instance, federal research money comes with the need to see that the province is committed to a certain project, whether that's just through Research Nova Scotia or if they broker on behalf of an institution, a relationship with another government department. And sometimes there's matching fund requirements. So that's a very important, Nova Scotia has been at risk over the past number of years. I can think of a couple of funding opportunities where we were very short on the matching funds, and we were at risk of losing that research opportunity that were in like critical areas, school food, refugees, like really important research work. So that's one part of their role. And then the other part is they really see themselves as an important institution for knowledge mobilization. So they really want to be making sure that research is happening in Nova Scotia that responds to community priorities, that responds to government priorities, and that researchers also work with communities and government so that, sort of to support the relationship. So that was a very long intro to say a couple of things. One is I'm wondering if the minister can comment on the strategic vision that he or the department has around Research Nova Scotia, and secondly, if there is a plan to make the $25 million an ongoing investment on an annual basis.
I recognize the Minister for Advanced Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for that question. So the ongoing funding for Research Nova Scotia is approximately $6.8 million. That $25 million big shot in the arm was really that we look at Research Nova Scotia as being that ecosystem that connects all the other ecosystems. We have a university ecosystem in research. We have a private research system. We have our NSCCs have research. We have so much that's going on with government, with private enterprises, that we want to make sure that they connect. We want to make sure that we're not duplicating things. I believe that in Nova Scotia, when there's a problem, I think there's a Nova Scotia solution. And a lot of people don't know how to connect to that. When we were visiting COGS and the NSCC Middleton campus, there's amazing things that are going on. There's research going on with drone technology used to measure the height and the quality of Christmas trees. So if you've ever been to a Christmas tree farm, it's very hilly, it's very difficult to walk, and it takes a lot of person hours to go with a stick and measure them. With a drone, they can do 50 acres in a couple of hours. There's also research that's going on at Mount St. Vincent University, Alzheimer's research, children's nutrition research and whatnot. We want to make sure that they connect. But MyTax is a wonderful example of monies being used for research for some of the most innovative things that are going on in the world. When we look at companies like the Tesla lab that they have at Dalhousie University, I mean, that is research that private companies are looking to advance themselves, that are using our post-secondary institutions, our Research Nova Scotia, in order to do that. And we need to continue to do that, because every time that there's a company that comes up with some kind of an innovation through research, that creates jobs, and they create good jobs. There's a lot of stuff going on in the province right now, even around psychedelics and trying to get psychedelics going. So Research Nova Scotia could potentially play a significant role in a new industry that we could have here in Nova Scotia. So my vision would truly be to try to get Research Nova Scotia to be that central core, that connects all the ecosystems, federally, provincially, municipally, small business, big business, it doesn't matter where it comes from, but we need somebody to coordinate that effort, and Research Nova Scotia is a key partner in that, and they do leverage their money very well, as you would know. So I feel like you could have answered this question very well yourself. Better, even.
I recognize the member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Island.
So I did appreciate hearing, your vision for Research Nova Scotia, absolutely. Okay, I have probably 30 seconds for one quick final question. I appreciate the focus on sexual violence policies and ensuring that institutions across the province have policies in place and are reviewing policies and implementing policies. I'm wondering if the department is considering, or the minister is considering, other priority areas such as alcohol and substance use.
I recognize the Minister for Advanced Education.
So student health is all important to us, and of course, drug abuse and alcohol abuse leads to mental health issues, and we as a government have truly put a lot of effort forward for that. But we support any of the efforts and stuff that our post-secondaries are doing in order to reduce the use of drugs, the use of alcohol. There's a lot of good work going on out there with some of our not-for-profit groups in harm reduction. It's important to recognize that and to support that where we can, and to continue supporting students that are in trouble because of alcohol and drug abuse.
I recognize the member for Cumberland North with 10 minutes to go.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this opportunity to ask a few questions. It's just in response to my colleague's question, it takes me back to just the culture in universities around alcohol. It was a few years ago, but I remember in Frosh Week being woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning and being paraded around, and they actually took us in front of NSLC and told us we had to get on our knees and bow down to it. You can imagine, 17 years old. That was what the Frosh Week leaders did back in those days. So there's definitely a culture of alcohol and drinking. But I wanted to ask a question, and my colleague touched on it, around sexual violence on campus. And I know there's been some work done, but I'm wondering, Minister, does the department spend any money on that? And is there any reporting, like are universities accountable to your department to report actual incidents of sexual violence? And are they responsible to report on what action is taken, if any, to the department?
I recognize the Minister for Advanced Education.
So thank you for that question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we have committed $470,000 per year to the universities and NSCC in order to help support their sexual violence prevention programs. As far as collecting data from each one, we do not have a central collection system of their data. They keep them they keep them with each independent institution. I'm not sure if you were here earlier or not, but that is one of the items that we have also put forward to our private career colleges that they have sexual violence prevention policies at their schools as well.
I recognize the member for Cumberland North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the further response. I'm wondering if the minister and his department might consider some accountability measures. And the reason I bring that up and the reason I'm asking these questions is in Cumberland North, we don't have a university. We are close to a university, of course, just across the border at Mount Allison, but we have a lot of young adults that would go to Nova Scotia universities. And unfortunately, I've had some come and meet with me and report that they have unfortunately been a victim of sexual violence at a Nova Scotia University campus. And in every situation when it was reported, no action was taken. And they felt, the victims felt like the university was trying to hide it because they didn't want it to get into the public. So the students came to me to say this culture, and this would have been in the last 2 to 4 years, so it's recent. So the students are telling me is that there may be policies, but is there accountability for actually reporting incidents and who's watching to see that actions are actually being taken? Because the students in several incidents, there was no action taken. So that's why I bring that up today. So we want to make sure, if there are policies, we want to make sure that they're effective, and if you're spending money, or if we're spending money, taxpayers' money, we want to make sure that it's being, I guess, put to good use.
I recognize the Minister for Advanced Education.
Thank you for that question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What's very fortunate is that those young adults that were assaulted had somebody to talk to in you. Sexual assault is a criminal offense, and our universities do report on their progress, and they do report how things are going. But as far as reporting specific incidents, as I said, it's a criminal matter, and unfortunately, there is a culture out there where sexual assault still happens, and then there's also shaming. There's also all kinds of things that happen where young people or anybody that are very hesitant to report. So as far as collecting statistics, I think that would be very difficult, and maybe even inappropriate, I guess, for universities to try to track whether or not it's been followed up on. But we do have to change the culture. We absolutely have to change the culture, and we have to support this program, and we have to get it out there that sexual assault is it's just not something that we can do. And just to refer back, when we talked about alcohol and drug abuse and addictions, my son, who is in grade 12, it's a very different world out there. So when he was in grade 9, we went to the drugstore and got an naloxone kit. And I said, every time you go to a party, make sure you have this in your backpack. And he thought I was crazy. And he said, the guys and stuff, my buddies, we don't do drugs. We don't do the opioids and stuff. And but now, being in a very different world, when he's in grade 12, he goes to a party. The kids have test strips, there's test strips to test whether or not there's fentanyl or there's different things. And it's a crazy world out there now, and we have to recognize that. We have to accept. And we have to do whatever we can to reduce the harm and support victims as best we can. But thank you for that question. It is an important question.
I recognize the member for Cumberland North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do have one other question I'd like to ask, but before I do, something that the minister could consider in his department is, like in healthcare, we collect a lot of data, but we don't use names, like if we're collecting data. So you could require universities to track reported incidents and ensure there is follow-up without, like, and still ensuring confidentiality. So I think that's something, you know, I would love the minister to consider, just to make sure that there is accountability and that victims can get some better action, I guess, and results. But what I wanted to ask a question about was just follow up from the fall session with regarding to licensed practical nurses. So I've had many LPNs approach me. They want to become an RN, and unless they have done their 2-year training at an NSCC campus, they are not eligible for the 2+2 to become an RN. So it affects a lot of LPNs in Cumberland County because a lot of them do their training in Moncton. I've had nurses contact me from all over the province, like they've maybe trained in Ontario and moved here to Nova Scotia or any other province. And as we know, LPNs all have the same national exam. So in order to qualify for the exam, they have to have a credentialed schooling program. So what we've asked, and we've been asking now for 3 to 4 years, is for all LPNs to be eligible for the 2+2. I've had some LPNs with 18 years of experience, but did their training in Ontario and would have to literally start from scratch to become an RN in the program. So I'm just wondering if there's been any progress on that work that we had discussed in the fall.
I recognize the Minister for Advanced Education with 1 minute to go. Order. Sorry. I will now pass the next line of questions. The time for the NDP caucus is up, and now I'll pass it over to our Liberal caucus. The time now is 10:31. Oh, sorry about that. I'd like to recognize the member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Thank you, and I appreciate if the minister could respond to wrap up that question. I've got one question, and then I believe ministers can have some time to have closing remarks and read his resolution. So perhaps you can answer the previous question quickly and then jump back in.
I recognize the Minister for Advanced Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for that question. Thank goodness, yes, we have had progress on that. You know, it's just like coming from, if you're coming from another province or another country to try to get proper credentialing for work that you've already done. It's important that we do it here in Nova Scotia. And I know you've brought that up before. We did take those suggestions back, and we are working with the schools, working with the College of Nurses to make sure that credentialing and everything works out, and that the whatever the outcomes and whatnot, they line up as well. So that is actively being worked on, and hopefully very soon that will be available to be able to go from one to the other. It makes sense, it's good practice, and we need those nurses. So.
I recognize the honourable member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask a couple of questions related to skilled trades and the the active and pending demand for the skilled trades. And when I look at the forecast from this year versus the estimate for the upcoming year, I note a slight decrease in the Nova Scotia Community College budget. I'm curious if the minister can weigh in on his appreciation for the number of jobs and the different types of jobs that would be associated with building houses. We just approved 22,000 new units in Halifax, and can the minister discuss why that budget would not be why it be a larger item to include more seats at our in our skilled trades programs at the NSCC, for example?
I recognize the Minister for Advanced Education.
Thank you for the question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the wonderful things about NSCC is their ability to pivot very quickly when it's needed. NSCC constantly looks at their programs, look at what the demand is, and can adjust very quickly depending on what program it is. One of the things about skilled trades, there is a number of pathways to get there. And if you want to work towards apprenticeship, we have youth apprenticeship, and it does fall under labor skills and immigration, but I do have some knowledge of this from working in the school system. But at age 15, you can actually get into a youth apprenticeship program and get skilled trades through there. Or you could actually get hired by a company that has journey people within that company to move up in that direction, and always use NSCC or somewhere, a private career college, to do your coursework in. So there are a number of different paths, not necessarily, NSCC is not the only one, but it is a vital one, and it's a big part of what we do. So my hope is that programs will be aligned to try to match as best as possible to what's needed out there.
I recognize the honourable member for Hammonds Plains Lucasville.
Thank you. Does the minister have anything that he might be able to table for the House by way of specific demand for the programs and what the projected demand would be? Again, given that there was just such a substantial housing announcement and presumably more of that type of fast-tracked activity to come. So I'm just curious what the observation of the need is going to be.
I recognize the Minister for Advanced Education.
Thank you for the question, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can't give you specific numbers. So these were just, those initiatives were just announced. But what I can tell you, anytime I've met with the construction sector, is that there's a demand for just about for every trade out there, not just for trades, but for unskilled labor as well, to go onto work sites, whether it's commercial or residential. So we have demand, a very high demand for anybody within the skilled trades or construction sector in general.
I recognize the honourable member for Hammonds Plains Lucasville.
Thank you, Minister, and perhaps through the chair, you can make some closing remarks and read your resolution. Thank you for your time, staff and company.
So before we conclude the consideration of estimates for tonight, I invite the Minister to offer closing remarks and then read the Department's estimate resolution. I recognize the Minister for Advanced Education.
I do want to reiterate, I work with an incredible group of professionals. We are a new department. We've had a lot of challenges. We've moved 3 times. We have another one on the go. We've really come together as a team. We're learning each other's personalities. God bless them. They're starting to learn to deal with me. They've put an awful lot of time into preparing these budget books, policy, trying to move Nova Scotia forward, trying to figure out what our government priorities and priorities for our department going forward. I can't thank Deputy Wanda, team behind me, the team back at Thompson Building, back at Maritime Center, put in hundreds and hundreds of hours of work to prepare for this, not just this, but everything that's going to move us forward. So it's with my deepest and sincerest appreciation. So, be it resolved, Mr. Speaker, that a sum not exceeding $676,617,000 be granted to the Lieutenant Governor to defray expenses in respect of the Department of Advanced Education pursuant to the estimate.
Shall Resolution E1 stand? Yes. The resolution stands. It is now 10:39 p.m., and the House is set to adjourn at 11. That concludes the subcommittee's consideration of estimates for today. The subcommittee will resume consideration when the House again resolves into a committee of the whole on supply. So I ask you to please return to your seats in the legislative chamber. The committee of the whole House must rise and report before the House concludes its business for the day. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.